When I was about 16, myself and 5 of my other male cousins, I being the oldest, used to spend our days causing mischief, as teenage boys do. We would ride our bikes all around the city in the hot Arizona desert that we live in, where the temperatures average about 115, and go exploring for random places and just generally checking out the city, while the bustle of the adults around us paid no attention. On one such day, we happened to come across a very run-down, seemingly abandoned house. There were locks on the front door, and all the windows were boarded up. But there was an entryway point in the backyard leading to a huge fire pit, and the back door was open. There in the backyard, near the fire pit against the back wall, was a really messed up painting of what I would imagine somebody else imagining what Satan's face would look like, with aligned number systems and quantity of 5. Like the 4 straight lines with a single line going through the other 4. There was a smell of burnt wood and the fire pit was still warm, and given that this was a day that was averaging about 110, it was pretty unusual. Being that I'm the most spiritual one in the group, looking at this, I kind of felt something wasn't right and that we should probably leave. There was a really foul odor in the air, of smoke and a hint of death. Now my cousins actually went inside the house, as if looking at the outside wasn't a clear warning sign enough. When we get inside the house, it's a lot worse. The smell and the uneasiness in the air just felt off. Now when we turned on our flashlights is when we saw them. Even though this was the middle of the day, due to the fact that all the windows were boarded up, it was very dark inside the house, even with the back door standing wide open. But there against the wall, and now I mean every single wall in the house, was, imagine what a porcelain doll's face looks like. There were masks of these attached to every single wall in the house, as if they were coming out of the wall themselves. They weren't nailed to the wall or anything, but they were actually part of the wall, as if this is the way the homeowner designed their house. They were all in different colors and varying levels of creepiness. It was about this moment that one of my younger cousins decided to kick one of the masks, which made it put a big hole in the wall. And that's when we hear a gruffy voice saying, "Get out." We run the 10 blocks to my cousin's house and none of us slept that night. Although the house has been renovated, it remains abandoned to this day. I myself believe that Satanism was practiced there, which is also odd considering the biggest church in the city is really, literally quite across the street. I've always wondered if they redid the walls and removed those masks when the house was renovated. It still sits empty to this day. Now, when we heard the voice, some of us consider that it was just a hallucination, but I fully believe at the very least there was a squatter sitting in the back of that house and heard the shattering of the wall, which is when the voice came out. When I was in high school, my girlfriend lived in Topanga Canyon, which is a pretty bizarre place filled with even more bizarre people. Well, one night, as I was leaving her house and I had to walk down the road to get to my car, most of Topanga Canyon's houses are accessed by a barely single-lane cracked tar roads with stumps and stuff coming up through them. It's like a 10-minute walk down the hill, and I get to my car and I get in. As it's pitch black outside, I sit there for a moment, and before I turn my car on, I hear a noise. Thinking maybe it might be a wild animal, I didn't move. Mountain lions and bears were very common in these parts of the canyon, and how was I supposed to know whether or not they could break into a 1990 Volvo 240DL? I hear the noise past the car, but I don't see anything. I freeze. And after about 5 minutes, I decided that if it was something dangerous, it would have stopped. So I turn on the car and I switch my headlights and I drive the rest of the way down the hill. And that's when I saw them. As I turned onto the wider portion of the road, I see two people with black cloths draped over their entire bodies. No shoes, and they're just walking slowly down the road towards the direction that I'm driving in. The clothes must have been velvet or similar, because they were pitch black even as my headlights passed across them. I gunned it around them and turned down onto the main road and watched in my rearview mirror as my tail lights' red color faded on their forms. I then realized that if I had left my girlfriend's house about 30 seconds later, I would have literally walked into two people wearing jet black, slowly walking in the darkness in the middle of the night into Topanga Canyon, which still sends shivers down my spine thinking about it all these years later. Back in my teenage hoodlum days, some friends and myself liked to do some urban exploration. Now, in this particular time, we were going to explore an abandoned medical facility, which was perched atop a very steep hill with only one road in and only one road out, which was also surrounded by a nice small forest. Now, from what we had heard, this place did some very serious medical procedures in its better days, things like open heart surgery. But now it was totally left to fall into disarray and to start rotting. Now, we imagined our expedition would be a creepy midnight jaunt through a local haunted hospital that we could then brag about to all of our friends. So I drive us up this hill and park behind the facility, and the very first thing that we notice is that there are some ambient lights on. Now, this place is not completely off the grid like we had been led to believe, which is no problem. It probably just means that there's some security there to scare off troublemakers like ourselves. The rest of the place is pitch black and there's no cars in the parking lot. And as we're scoping out the exterior, we notice that there's a board over one of the windows. So sure enough, we peel it back and the window is broken, which is our way into the place. And we waste no time in vaulting up and over, avoiding the edges of the broken glass. And suddenly, we're all inside, and it's clear this place is certainly not abandoned. There are interior lights that come on as we wander around. Motion sensor. There's some equipment scattered about, and I start to get an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. My friends are enjoying themselves, and I don't want to be the guy who got scared and made us all leave. Yet I can't ignore the sense of pure dread that is getting stronger every second that I'm in this place. Finally, I tell them that we need to GTFO, and I don't bother explaining why. As I was the one who drove, they have no choice but to follow. And as we scramble back out the windows we came in and climb into my car, we peel off, turning off the only road that leads up the hill and stopping at a nearby gas station. A few of my friends had gone inside to get drinks, but a few of us had stayed in the car. And from where we parked, you can see up the hill to the outside of the facility. And we watched as security and police pulled up to the front of the car, right near the entrance to the place, and we had missed them by a mere 2 minutes. If I hadn't listened to my gut that night, my friends and I probably would have spent some time in juvie for breaking and entering. Not really scary, but a cautionary tale to not go exploring where you shouldn't. One day, 3 of my friends and myself decided to explore a local ruined mansion that was once owned by a rather eccentric millionaire. And it had a tower, and when I say tower, I mean a 14-story penthouse right smack in the middle of the woods, with an elevator shaft up to it from the 2-story mansion below. The driveway itself is the only way onto the property without using a boat, as there is a moat around the entire house, making it impossible to enter from any other way. We were all very bored, and I was about 18 and 19 at the time, so we decided to go and explore this mansion just to give ourselves something to do. We have heard stories about it, but none of us had actually ever been to this tower, which was very visible from a local highway, so we knew exactly where it was. We decided to hike in, and we decided we would go around dusk, probably between 8 p.m. or so the lighting had started to decrease by the time we had walked the mile up to the driveway to reach the mansion. After some time exploring and honestly not seeing much that was interesting, my friend decided to tell us a story of a party that had happened here 10 years ago or so. Now in this story, a drunk teenager had fallen down the elevator shaft and had passed away. I had service on my phone, so obviously I decided to consult Google to see how accurate this story was so I could call my friend on his bullshit. Turns out it was very real, which kind of freaked us all out a little bit, as it was now very dark outside and we were in a ruined mansion where a death had taken place. There were even a few articles claiming how the tower was now haunted. And after getting bored of exploring the basement and the first floor, we decided to climb our way up to the second floor. We reached a lounge-type room when we had our first scare of the night. We looked out from a window and saw a flock of birds take flight from the woods, like there was something out there. An ominous feeling came over all of us. At this point I was on edge, but I am not weak, I thought to myself. I figured I'd keep exploring until my friends were ready to leave. We also found a kitchen on the second floor, and that's when things started to really go south. The kitchen was very deep into the house with no windows to the outdoors. We heard a door open on the floor below us and heard the sounds of footsteps. We all stopped dead in our tracks and got as quiet as possible, listening for the slightest of sounds. We could still hear these footsteps downstairs, and it really freaked us all out. We quietly decided we needed to sneak out of the mansion as fast as we possibly could. We snuck to one of the second-story windows that had been broken by vandals that would come to this place, and we were able to squeeze out onto the first-story roof above the garage. We jumped down from there and bolted as fast as we could. I do remember myself turning around as we ran and seeing the silhouette of a figure standing at the front of the house. No doubt who we had heard when we were upstairs. We kept running to the very end of the driveway where, much to our dismay, 2 cop cars were waiting for us. Apparently, we had not been watched by some terrifying ghost or demon, or criminal. Sadly, it was just the cops. Apparently, they had laser tripwires installed to keep explorers away from the house. I really have no clue why. Maybe for legal reasons, perhaps. But anyway, at the end of the day, I got a $250 fine for trespassing, and a very strict talking to by the cops to never return to the house. Back in 2013, when I was about 14, my boyfriend and I at the time decided to take a nice walk through the woods near my parents' place. Now, mind you, I had been walking these woods with various friends for over an entire year at this point. Now, the opening of a clearly made trail came from the street, and after the first mile you come to a big circular clearing where we had seen old campfires there before and even walked a lot of it to the point that led us to another neighborhood. This time was a bit different. A few walks prior, another friend and I had spotted a tent, but we never dared to go anywhere close to it because it wasn't there the previous year. Now, my boyfriend and I were walking and we realized that this tent is in shambles, completely torn up, but it's still standing nonetheless. This already gave me the creeps, and the entire time it felt like someone else was there with us. Of course, as a 15-year-old boy, my boyfriend had to be brave to show that his girlfriend that he wasn't afraid. So we continue to walk down the path, and I have no good feeling about this walk. He decided to get off the path a little bit and go towards some running water that we had heard from a nearby creek. It's down the hill a little bit, completely covered in leaves where I lose my footing. I fall, and as I go to get up, I shit you not, I see human skeletal remains are right next to me. I absolutely freak out and call my boyfriend over, and he instantly goes pale in the face. Now, mind you, both of us, completely freaked out, took a quick set of photos for the police later, and ran the entire 3 miles back down to the main road, and all the way back to my parents' house. We knew we'd probably be in trouble, but I'm freaking out and trying to tell my parents what happened. And through a shaken up voice, I managed to get out that we had found skeletal remains. They don't believe us even after the photos I show them that are on my phone, and we begged them to call the police. Eventually the police did come, and we had to walk them the 3 miles back to the skeleton that we had found that was appearing in all of our photos. As it turns out, the remains belonged to a man who had lived in a neighboring town about 30 minutes away, who had been reported missing in 2011, 2 years prior to us finding him by himself in that forest.